It was funny. I first heard about Trainual like 2 jobs ago, maybe like 7 years. I had a boss, we were helping a nonprofit sphere, and he's like, there's this company that you can like document your stuff and assign it to people. It's like, oh, I want to do that. And I kept begging at my job, can we please get this? Can we please get this? So Trainual for the longest time was the one that got away in the ops space. And so I was so excited to come to a company where I could actually look into possibly using Trainual.
Now you're the one that got away.
Yeah.
We'll see.
This episode of Inside the Process is powered by Trainual, the one app that organizes who does what and how. Check it out at trainual.com.
Today is not about us, it's about you. So this is going to be jam-packed. Yeah. Tons of dad jokes coming.
We are right now laying the groundwork for who is going to be leading tomorrow.
This song is such a jam.
Ideas don't build multi-million-dollar businesses. It's the implementation and execution of those ideas that do.
Self-made can lead to self-destruction. You are successful at what you give attention to.
This is why I was created. This is why I was made. I was made to do this.
It's about how to build your playbook.
That was such an incredible session.
We are super thrilled to welcome all of you here today to Inside the Process. That's with myself, Shawn Jensen. I'm a senior success coach here at Trainual, as well as my partner here, Mallory Lessner, who is, you need to say your title. I always forget exactly what your title is.
I mean, it's just made up at this point. Strategic Ops.
There it is. Strategic Ops. Exactly right.
Which I'll explain that soon, what that means.
Sounds good. Well, yeah, thanks everybody for being here and taking time out of your day. We're going to hop right on in and do a little bit of introduction. So again, I'm a senior success coach here at Trainual. I've been here with Trainual for over 4 years now. I was employee number 9, which is crazy. That we've got somewhere like 126 people, I think. So we've grown pretty rapidly in the past 4 years, and it's been such a fun ride. I've loved every minute of it. Prior to coming to Trainual, I spent over 10 years in education and watching people learn stuff from each other. And that's what I love to infuse. I get to work with our customers, our coach, and coach them day in, day out on how to implement Trainual, but also how to take that content that they're putting in their Trainual accounts and turning it into really effective training content for their team members. So that's what I get to do on a day in, a day out basis. And then we've got the lovely Mallory. Explain a little bit about what you do.
Yeah, so that's Strategic Ops title. So I was the director of continuous improvement and operations at a PEO company for about 5 years. And I did a lot of Lean Six Sigma and process improvement in the prior roles that I had before that. And when I was at the PEO company, I found Trainual and absolutely fell in love with the products, fell in love with the team, and connected with Chris and with Jonathan. And I said, hey, find a spot for me on the team. I need to be on Team Trainual. And they said, okay, we're going to bring you on as Strategic Ops. You're going to work with our community and teach them everything you know about operations and process improvement. And I said, heck yes. So here we are. And that is what my Strategic Ops title means. It means I teach you operations in the community, but technically I'm on the marketing team.
Just a little bit about this show, the Inside the Process show. We do this on a monthly basis, and we bring out super awesome people like Derek, we'll be introducing him in just a few moments. We run this show very much like an open podcast. So you will notice that you can unmute your lines whenever you like. So if you've got questions, you got comments, you got things you want to share, we want to hear it during the session throughout. So you can feel free to unmute your lines. You can use the chat. You can use the little Zoom reactions. We just get a kick out of seeing thumbs up and smiley faces and celebrations and unicorns and all that stuff flying all across our screen. So feel free to use those whenever you like. Bottom line is, if you've got questions, you got things you want to say, we want to hear it today. Okay. This session is about you. It's about helping you and giving you the information you need specifically about our topic today. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it right back over to Mallory to introduce Mr. Derek?
So I met our guest today through LinkedIn, and he reached out to me. He said, "Hey, I know you don't know me super well, but I'd love to set up a coffee chat with you," which is something us LinkedIn people are pretty notorious for. He's like, "I want to talk to you about an opportunity in the continuous improvement space." And of course, I was like, "That sounds really fun. I would love to spend a Saturday morning like that." And so we chatted about this amazing opportunity that he had with this company called EOS Cloud. And we stayed connected out on LinkedIn from that point forward. And obviously, he took the role at EOS Cloud, and he brought Trainual to his organization, which was probably the coolest full circle thing ever, because I landed at Trainual and then he brought on Trainual. It was just such a fun story to share. But he absolutely crushed his content game in the first few months that he was in the system. So much so, actually, that he also, I know Laura's on here, but he became a Trainual top customer and a Trainual Insider MVP, which is not a small feat in the first year of using our product at all. Shortly thereafter, he was promoted to Director of EOS and Process Excellence from his original position that he took of a process analyst. And so he's got a pretty dang stacked record. He's revered by his team for his efficiency and effectiveness, especially when it comes to meetings. So I would love for you all to welcome Derek McLarty and show him some love in the chat.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, thanks,
Got
guys.
hand raises, all got the good stuff, Derek.
Yeah, no, that's quite the introduction. I would love to meet that guy. No, man, I love you guys at Trainual. I love getting to interact with you. It was funny. I first heard about Trainual 2 jobs ago, maybe 7 years. And I guess you guys, I don't know how old you were at that point. I had a boss. We were helping in the nonprofit sphere, and he's like, "There's this company that you can document your stuff and assign it to people." It's like, "Oh, I want to do that." And I kept begging at my job, "Can we please get this? Can we please get this?" So Trainual for the longest time was the one that got away in the ops space. And so I was so excited to come to a company where I could actually look into possibly using Trainual. And it's been a massive hit, man. People love our onboarding. They love our training.
Now you're the one that got away.
Yeah.
We'll see. I've really enjoyed my new role. It's been a ton of fun. They hired me to come in and just go department by department and document all of their processes. And none of that happened. They instead decided we need something a lot more on the foundational level. And I said, well, I've got this 5-year experience of implementing and leading EOS at a prior job and sitting on their leadership team. Would love to help you guys do that if you think that's what's necessary to get everybody on the same page and the business running like a system. And they said, yeah, and then moved me into that role more officially. And so I've been leading us through EOS implementation, and that's been my full-time baby for the last all of 2023.
I love it. You guys are doing such good work.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. Also, being the process guy and then getting a reputation for running effective meetings mean you get to be late to nothing. Absolutely nothing. Or people will rip you to shreds in jest and good tease.
Yeah, you got kind of a high bar set for yourself there for sure.
Yeah, that's right.
Which is, I'm glad that that's what we're talking about today. I think that's going to be very much aligned, right?
Yeah, for sure.
In the spirit of that, let's kind of highlight the main keys that you're going to be getting as we chat with Derek here today. So a few things we'll be talking through. You're going to learn how to diagnose an ineffective meeting. Really excited about giving you some skills there. We're going to talk a little bit about how to structure a healthy meeting, and then how to become a 5-star facilitator, along with implementing the L10 process template. We'll talk a lot more about that during the session here today, but those are the main things you're going to get out of the session here today. So with that said, over to you, Mallory.
So we have a quick activity for you guys just to get in the spirit of things. So Shawn's going to actually launch a poll that you'll see on your screens. You should see it now. And I'd love for you to think about your team, even if it's maybe a little bit of self-reflection, if you're the one that's running those meetings. But also, if you're someone who just attends meetings on the regular, how would you rate your meetings today on a scale of 1 to 10? And really think about that from the context of what we're talking about today, which is effectiveness and efficiency. How would you rate your meetings today? So if we do a little bit of a combined average here of what people are saying, I'm gonna cheat a little bit and do this combined average, because the majority of people are actually falling in that 4 to 5 range. That's about 47% of the people who voted, even though technically 8 won. I would love to talk to those people and see how maybe they align with the content today. But I would say the majority of this crowd falls in that 4 to 5 range, which actually is the EOS average. We did not have this, 4 predicted. We didn't read your minds and know that 4 to 5 was going to be the answer. It's actually very common for 4 to be the response. And so Derek, I would love for you to talk to us about why people think meetings are a 4 for efficiency and effectiveness.
Yeah, we have all seen those coffee mugs that say, I was just in a meeting that could have been an email. And we've all sat in those. They are just a huge waste of time. And I think I was reading some stats the other day that like 15% of all working time in a company is spent on meetings, and 71% of those meetings are unproductive. And so I think if you went to most leadership teams and you said, I know a way to improve 15% of your total output that right now is hovering around a 29% of effectiveness, they would jump at the opportunity. But we don't look at meetings like that. Although if you're an employee, you spend about 8 meetings a week. If you're an exec, you're in like 12. And so knowing that 3/4 of those almost are going to end up being ineffective, that's not a huge surprise. I think it costs like the US economy or businesses in general about $37 billion a year, just time wasted in ineffective meetings. And I think the reason that happens is because we are naturally social creatures. And we want to get with people and we want to chat. And that's not what makes a meeting effective, just chatting and socializing. Meetings are effective, just to tease a little bit, when they actually produce results in the real world. And so getting people out of chitty chat world and into a way where they're actually able to be effective and make impactful decisions is really where you want to go when you're trying to get these meetings on track. And maybe one last comment is for you guys that are listening and you're hearing EOS for the first time, it stands for the Entrepreneurial Operating System. And what we'll go over today, you don't have to be doing EOS for it to be helpful. So this is not targeted at a very small niche. These principles in general can be applied pretty much anywhere.
Awesome. Yeah, I was thinking about that, the needing the balance between the chit chat, because there's a human interaction, a human element that's important. But obviously the productivity needs to be there as well. And how that needs to be a balance. And a balance doesn't necessarily mean, 50-50 in this regard. It can be 70-30 or whatever it is, but having the right type of balance between that, because that human interaction breeds the trust, and it breeds the willingness to collaborate and work and problem solve together. But I love that there's a framework for keeping it more focused and again, productive. So looking forward to learn more about that one from you today. Talk through a little bit of the ineffective pieces and then the effective pieces of the meetings here.
Yeah, I think so there's a lot of opportunity that's lost in meetings in general. They can, for an organization, be kind of like and this is something that you would learn in the EOS world, they can act like a heartbeat, pumping accountability and pumping productivity and issue clearing throughout the organization. One of the ways that gets lost is when they're inconsistent. They are constantly being rescheduled. They don't start at the same time. attendees are not always there. They're having to, I've got a conflict. They go over in time. They don't always have the same agenda. So it almost feels like you're reinventing the wheel and starting from scratch every time, and they're just moving around constantly. And so that can really make it difficult for those to actually deliver consistent results. I think another one is that those meetings don't actually incorporate any accountability at all. The accountability that a meeting can provide can be as simple as a recurring due date, whether it's on measurables that you're trying to go after or milestones. I think the way that I like to think about it is that if I look at a quarter and I set a goal for that quarter, I've got 13 shots, average quarter being 13 weeks. I got 13 shots to move the ball down the field. And the meeting can really act as accountability to making that progress. We all have to look each other in the face and say whether or not we're on track or off track for that. And then I think another one is that meetings don't have prioritized discussion. If you think about some of your interactions with people, a lot of times we miss each other because we're not even sure what we're trying to discuss, right? You probably see, I don't know if you've seen that video on the internet where the guy's having a conversation with his wife, and it's like, it's not about the nail. If you haven't seen that, look it up. Well, we're having two different conversations. And so getting really clear on an objective for the conversation, and then making sure that objective is of the highest priority and you're not spending time discussing anything else, can really be helpful. And then the opposite of that is where you're stopping to discuss everything is really can be a waste of time and make meetings drag on and go too long. And then I think lastly is you sit around, you have a conversation in the meeting, you all throw a bunch of great ideas out there, and then we all go back to our jobs and don't do anything. And so it doesn't actually create change in the real world. And so I don't know if any of you guys have had that experience or that describes why you put a 4 or a 5. But those can often be the main reasons is lack of consistency, lack of accountability, low priority discussions, and they don't actually change anything. It's just a lot of talking. That being the case, then let's consider kind of the antitype or the superhero to the villain of what an effective meeting would look like. So it needs to be consistent and predictable. It can be for people a very, I count on this thing to always happen, and therefore that leads to the next thing, the accountability. So when I know that the meeting is always going to be same time, same place, same agenda, I know that accountability will be real because I know it's coming. There's no getting out of it. And I'm not allowed to miss the meeting, right? This is one of the most important things in keeping our team on the same page. So that accountability, looking each other in the face and saying where you aren't on that. Especially as Westerners, we don't like that. We don't like having to be very direct. And so providing consistent accountability on the things that matter. And then whenever you're having discussion, kind of creating this thing in your head, and that's the constant question is this the most important thing that we need to be talking about right now? And feeling comfortable interrupting one another when the answer to that is no. That's where you really have a high performing. And then the last one is that, you want to make sure that what you do in the meeting actually leads to change in the real world, not just a bunch of discussion. And so how do you take those decisions, turn them into action items, and then use next week's accountability to make sure that those solutions actually come into the real world and affect the business in a productive way?
Hey, Derek, I'm going to put you on the spot here for a second because hopefully other people are thinking about this too. How do you address someone in a way that still establishes and preserves the rapport and the trust and the bond and all the good things that you've built with that person? How do you approach them in a way that during a meeting, if maybe they're hijacking it or they're taking it in a direction you don't want to go, how do you do that in a way that's effective but still preserves the relationship?
I think the first thing is just to clarify it as a norm. Hey guys, we're going to try this new format. And one of the points of the new format is to keep us on topic. You guys see how, when you start resonating, some of these are the signs of a low quality meeting. Everybody's like, yes, yes, yes. That's why I keep scheduling my customer calls during them. Like, we all know what that feels like. And so if you say, I want to move us to a direction where we're actually discussing things and all of that discussion is pointed at a particular objective, and I want us to be comfortable interrupting one another. When you establish that expectation, they know it's coming. And then the other thing I would say is make it fun. Make it fun. So I've seen some groups like actually take little squeaky toys and they put them around the conference table and then throw them at each other whenever they get off topic. Or in the EOS world, we just blurt tangent. And we say it all the time. So if anybody has the freedom to blurt tangent, and we're all in this together, right? And the first couple of times it's awkward, but power through. And once you get through it, it just becomes part of the meeting, blurting out tangent, because we're all trying to keep the meeting on track together. It's not just the facilitator.
That's such good advice. We actually had something pretty similar in my last organization, but it was parking lot. And so we had a whiteboard behind us. Like, you could do this virtually, you can make it work. But if ever somebody went down a bunny trail or started getting off topic, we'd go, okay, parking lot. And it captured what they wanted to share in their idea, which makes them feel heard. And it's important. We're going to address it later. But we're going to put it on the parking lot board and we're going to come back to it at a more appropriate time. That was super effective for us as a team. So I love that. Thank you for sharing that with us. All right. So we talked a ton about how to identify an inefficient meeting and how to identify an effective and efficient meeting. And one of the things that tends to kind of toggle on the line of being inefficient, but also kind of effective is icebreakers. And I feel like I got some feedback not long ago from my team about, hey, you're really direct. I love that you love to just cut to the chase and get things done, but it doesn't help you when you're building relationships, especially when you're trying to implement change. As a continuous improvement director, I was just, this monster of change. Everything was always going to be changing or being documented. And so my boss said, you have to figure out a way to be direct and get things done, but also preserve those relationships, which I think is why I kind of called you out on that initial question. But I'm curious how you effectively manage the chatter that's kind of necessary, right, on the top part of that meeting, and implement icebreakers, or as EOS calls them, segues.
Yeah, and so I'll be blunt and say that the meetings that people walk out of and they're just like, whoa, that was awesome. Those meetings are very focused and the discussion is very prioritized. And so the first thing I would say is, if you are a leader in any official or unofficial way, the meeting is not the time to build those relationships primarily. That you should go out of your way to build those relationships outside of the meeting, knowing that you're going to have to make withdrawals from those relational accounts in the meeting. We're going to have to really trust each other. This template does not work without trust. And it's the foundation to the whole thing. You have to know that my intentions are good. I have to be confident that your intentions are good. And doing that is going to take some investment outside. Now, that said, we still want to transition the meeting and let the first thing we do remind that each other is human. And so we do in our company a segue where we just say, all right, best professional news, best personal news from the last 7 days. Psychologically starts the meeting on a high note and reminds all of us that we have lives that aren't just work, and that there's another dimension to who this person is in front of me. It can be a really cool opportunity to get to know your coworkers. And at first, everybody's squeamish. This feels dumb. But then once it becomes routine, as the leader, you just kind of push through. Then they really start looking forward to it.
I love that. I was in a school district in a past employment life, working at a school office, and working with a group of teachers, and I was a third party coming in to teach them how to use a software. I was joining their team meeting, and they started very much like this, where they went around the table and everyone had a personal win or something that they were sharing. And it was interesting because I just joined a meeting previously, a day earlier at a different school, where they just got right into business. And the feeling in that room was so different when there is this experience of, like you said, of trust. Everyone was commenting on people's on their wins. People were feeling good. And as soon as we were all done with that piece, and it took a little bit to do, but when we got done with that, everyone was like fired up and ready to rock and roll with this. And it popped right into getting it done. So it was awesome stuff. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah. And I think maybe just another thing to keep in mind, we all know this. Oh crap, I got a meeting in 5 minutes and I need to wrap up this discussion and talk to a couple people along the way. And you're just like falling into that room, falling into that meeting. The day-to-day operations of the business are just right on the back of your mind. To have something that signals to everyone's brain, this is now a new space, so that all of that can stay outside for 90 minutes or however long your meeting is, will significantly elevate your leadership, because now you're working on the team, on the business, rather than in the business. And so if you just go straight into business, everybody's mind is probably still wherever they were 2 minutes before they walked in. When you stop and pause like that, you're going to get a lot better conversation and interaction.
So let's pretend here for a second that you just shared with me your awesome promotion, and everybody's feeling good about the meeting. Let's talk about how to really make the meeting effective and what we're highlighting in that meeting, how we're measuring that meeting.
Are you asking specifically like around what do I do after the segue?
Yes.
Okay, perfect.
Walk us through like the reporting structure.
Awesome. So the next section we move into is reporting. And we call it reporting because we want to stress that this is reporting only. What we're essentially doing is we're doing a quick spot check of all the important things that we need to be aware of to see if those things need to be discussed later. And so in the reporting section, we're going to go over our rocks, which for us are just our quarterly goals. We're going to go over our to-dos, any action items that we set at the previous meeting. We'll go over our weekly scorecard to make sure everything on the team is hitting its weekly goals and we don't need to stop and troubleshoot that later in the meeting. And then we'll also go over like headlines. Is there any information about people, both customers and employees, good or bad, that's going on that all of us need to be aware of and maybe we need to discuss? And to kind of circle back, this is one of the hardest things to do, to just say my rock is on track or off track. My rock or my to-do is done or not done. People don't like that. They want to explain, but this is where the most time is lost. And that's because not all these things maybe need to be discussed. This is possibly low priority discussion. And so what we're doing with each of these items is if any of them represent a problem, we just add them, like you said, to the parking lot, or add them to the agenda of things that we're going to discuss, so that when we do talk, we're only talking about the most important things. And so we're just quickly doing a spot check. Is this on track, off track for all of this stuff? And then if anybody wants to discuss anything, they just say drop or add it, and we add it to the list, and then it can get prioritized along with everything else.
Yeah, so we segued that into solving. So now we've got the structure, and this is probably one of my favorite parts of your discussion here about how do we actually solve the issues we come to do, right? This is one of the main reasons why we have meetings, is to solve problems and to identify things that need to be addressed or fixed and whatever. So love to hear the process here.
Yeah, so in the EOS world, we call this IDS, which means identify, discuss, and solve. So the first thing that we'll do is we'll look at our list of issues, our parking lot, our risk register, whatever you want to call it. We're looking at all of the issues, and we're going to select the top 3. So what is the most important thing that we need to address and solve this week? And we're only going to select 3. Don't waste your time prioritizing everything because you might not get to it. So maintain that time and just go 1, 2, 3. And you can do this through multi-voting, first come, first serve, however you want to do it. But we get our first 3 issues selected. Then we take our first issue, and whoever put it on the list, we say, okay, state this issue in 1 sentence. And so they will then present the issue to the group, and they'll say, our sales measurable for last week was off track. All right. So now the whole group knows what the issue is. It's been introduced. The next thing that we then do is we say, all right, now we're going to identify the root of this issue. And I like to say that at the beginning, because if you don't, nobody's clear on what we're trying to discuss. And so I'm putting out clearly for everybody what our objective is. And anything else that we discuss is where we jump in and very playfully interrupt one another and say, tangent, is that about identifying the root of the issue? And so, Mallory, you probably have a ton of experience with this in the continuous improvement space around things like fishbone diagrams and 5 whys, and all of that is about identifying the root. And we're just saying why over and over again until it's clear to everyone that's the root. And to give you a little bit of encouragement, the vast majority of the time, your roots are going to be a process or a person. Either somebody, for whatever reason, is not able to perform a particular function, or a process is not operating in a way that makes sense with today's business. And so maybe we take that example of sales numbers off track. Well, why was it off track? Because they didn't get the order in time. All right, why didn't they get the order? And we just keep doing that. And one of the things we ended up finding out is that Susie in the administrative role is overwhelmed. And now we've identified the root. We haven't spent any time discussing solutions, because until we identify the root, we don't want to spend any of our discussion on solving a problem that may just be a symptom. So we want to make sure that everything that we're discussing right now in this stage is focused on asking why until we all agree what the root of the problem is. I'll give you guys just one of the most beautiful examples I saw of this from the quarterly meeting that I led our leadership team through on Monday. They came in, they shared their segues, and after everybody went around, I was listening. I was like, guys, I love those segues, but you all sound exhausted. Like, even your good news are like, despite this, I'm still okay. It's just like, why are you so exhausted? And there were just all these different projects that were going on last quarter that were unexpected, and were sucking up so much time and resources in the business. And they were looking at the road ahead, and they're like, man, we're going to have to do more of that in Q4. And so identifying the root is where you can make real impacts in the business. So that's the first piece.
Dan has a quick question in that same vein. So he said, what do you do if there's no agreement on what the root actually is?
So one of the things that I've done in the past is I've noticed that as I'm breaking things down, there's sometimes multiple roots. Like, we don't all agree on which one is the most important. And so maybe it's, so we were doing one recently on why is this particular training not working? And it was like, well, the training's not clear. That was one problem. Employees don't know why it's important that they follow this process. And our audit processes are pretty weak. Well, those are 3 different things. And so what we ended up doing is saying, okay, which of those will have the biggest impact if we attack it now? And which of those need to be put on the list? So maybe you don't get consensus on exactly what the root is, but if you list multiple and then attack maybe the most important one, that might be helpful in moving the meeting forward so that we don't stall too long. Once you start hearing people repeating themselves, it's time to move on. Now we're just kind of lobbying for our position, but we're not adding any new information to the discussion for the team to make a decision. So that would be the way I would typically handle multiple roots or a lack of consensus there.
That's a really solid insight.
And one of the other things I like to do, and this kind of moves into the next section, is that once we have agreement on the root cause that we're about to try to solve, I signal to everybody, are we all agreed that this is the root cause? And everybody's like, yeah. And I would say 90% of the time, yes. Then we move into discussion. Now, to emphasize the value of the identify stage, most of the time you will spend 50% or more solving an issue and just trying to identify the root. But once you labor to do that and everyone's clear, yes, this is the problem, it's this particular person or this particular process for whatever reason, then the solution actually becomes pretty obvious a lot of times. It doesn't take a lot of creative solutions, because you can see, oh, we need to revisit that process, or we need to hire another person, or we need to clarify expectations or whatever. So if you will labor to identify the root and not waste your time trimming weeds, then that will be really, really helpful when it gets to the decision or the discussion phase. I see a lot of teams that they want to feel like they're making progress. And so they end up doing this thing where the boss sits at the center of the room and they just go, here's a problem, how should we solve it? Here's a problem, how should we solve it? Here's a problem, how should we solve it? And it gives this sensation that they're making progress and knocking things out. But the reality is that they could have solved like 7 things if they would just do one thing at the root. And you definitely don't want that kind of mantra for your meeting. And in the discussion phase, the issue solving phase, if the boss is doing the majority of the talking, that is not, this could be like a bonus ineffective meeting. If the boss is doing the majority of the talking, that is an ineffective meeting. I think I've heard once somebody called it hippo decision making, highest paid person's opinion. And so you don't want that, because that means that's how your team is running throughout the rest of the week, is that the manager is the one making all the decision making and they don't have empowerment and they don't know what to do with all these problems they're running in. I think as a leader, if I can sit back and watch them identify, them discuss, and I'm just trying to insert new questions to help their thinking, and they're doing all of the combating back and forth, like this should be lively. There should be opinions and emotions and all this, like people should really, really be invested in this. Then if I can just sit back and watch it happen and just try to keep it on track, now I know I have a really engaged team that's actively trying to solve problems for the entire department or company or wherever. All right, so that was an aside. It's just something else to keep your mind attending to is how, as a leader, can I slowly step back and let them be the ones that are trying to discuss this. So once I got the root identified, now we're going to move to discussions. The goal here is let's discuss possible solutions to this by getting all the information on the table and only saying it once. We don't let people say things more than once. And if they do, that's where we playfully jump in and yell tangent or whatever. But we want to discuss possible solutions and possible consequences to those solutions. And then once all the information's on the table, the team agrees to make a decision for the good of the company. Right? Not for the good of the department or the good of the individuals, but for the good of the company, big picture. And that's the way that we want to present that question. What solution is the best decision long-term for the company? And then we make that decision. And then we all look at each other and say, do we agree that this would solve the problem as a root? And they say, yes. And then we move on to solve the issue. And we say, all right, well, then here are the action items that need to happen. And most issues should be able to be solved with just a quick 7-day action item. Anything larger than that is probably a pretty big undertaking that you need to put on the parking lot and postpone into the other quarter, unless you want to potentially jeopardize the objectives you set at the beginning of this quarter. Now, there may be some emergencies, but if you're finding yourself constantly introducing large projects in the middle of the quarter, you're not going to be able to get anything actually accomplished. You're gonna end up just having a bunch of effort poured towards a bunch of things, but no results at the end of the finish line. And so we set a clear action item that should be done at the end of 7 days. Somebody owns that, and it's due at the next meeting, unless we have to put it on the parking lot. And so this allows it to actually make it into the real world. And this needs to be a SMART objective where it's clearly measurable and everyone is on the teams agreed on this is what it looks like for this thing to be done. It could be have a conversation with somebody, whatever. Most of the solutions all kind of circle around one of three things. You can basically say, I have a decision to be made, I have a information needing to be gathered, or I have something where we need to get alignment on. And those are normally the kinds of solutions that you'll see there. So, and just to kind of show how this section works, what we do is we continually stay in the issue solving mode, only discussing the highest priority items and always letting that discussion target towards one of those three things: identifying the root, discussing solutions, and making a decision to solve. And after we get this issue 1 solved, then we go to issue 2. After we go to issue 2 solved, we go to issue 3, and then we reprioritize with a number 1, 2, and 3. And then no matter where we're at, once there's 5 minutes left in the meeting, we move to closing. And in closing, there's 3 things that we want to make sure we do. We want to make sure that everyone is clear on the to-dos that have been assigned. Because if you think back to the issues section, those to-dos almost certainly represent solutions to problems. And so we want to be clear that everybody knows what needs to be done, who's going to do it, and they need to commit to, yes, I can get that done. The schedule is clear. I have time for it, or speak up and say, hey, I don't think I can get that done. So we'll clarify to-dos. Everybody knows what needs to be done.
This is probably my favorite part of what you're teaching for effective meetings. I'm always, you can ask Shawn, I'm always the person who's like running to a sauna after a meeting or like sharing the notes in Slack. It's something that's been drilled into me in the continuous improvement and process space as being so, so important. And for me personally, not coming out of a meeting without to-dos will take that meeting for me personally from a 9 or a 10 down to that 4 or 5. Like that alone will drop it down, because I think that's why people get to this place of, why did I just sit in that meeting? What did we even accomplish? What are we supposed to do? What did that solve? And then they ultimately just have this opinion of, that was a waste of time.
Yeah.
So I feel like those to-dos are so, so, so important. So thank you for touching on that.
Absolutely. And I mean, just to echo back to you, a similar wiring, like this is something that I use even in non-L10 meetings, because like, for example, I'm interacting with my boss. I want to make sure I know exactly what his expectations are between now and the next time we talk. And so he doesn't look at me and say, hey, could you recap to me all of the to-dos? Instead, I look at him like, all right, what I heard you say is this is what I'm going to do. And then he's like, yes, no, don't do that. That's not what I meant. Don't worry about that now. Okay, sweet. So now I'm not taking on too much work, and I'm also not leaving anything undone. So yeah, that's something you take into any meeting that you have. And it probably also trickles into my social life and makes me a total weirdo, but I'll take it.
Amen. I've got my whole life in ClickUp.
That's right. That's right.
It's so true. I really look forward to the debriefs from Mallory, because she has clarified those so well. And, you know, it's something that she's my mentor in that for sure. I've learned quite a few tips and tricks. I love that concept, though, again, of having those to-do items that are so super clear and they're documented somewhere. Yeah. Because you're right. Without those, we just feel like, oh, okay, what did we do? What happened there? But with those clearly documented in a place that everyone has access to who is part of that, that is crucial. That way we're able to stay on track and make sure we're going back and accomplishing those things. That is a great accountability piece that is largely missing from a lot of meetings, I've noticed as well. So thank you for sharing that.
Absolutely. And if I could give the attendees a little bit of advice that I've just learned from experience, is you need to set to-dos with the expectation of Jason Bourne levels of amnesia. Like, you need to write that to-do knowing that everyone walks out and immediately gets the Men in Black zap and forgets everything. Because if you don't, then everybody comes back in 7 days like, what was I even supposed to do? And so just write it down. Write it down so that it's clear, smart, black and white. You're going to forget it. And honestly, it'll probably be procrastinated. But as long as you maintain consistent meetings, everybody like the day before will be like, oh, I got to get that thing done. And then it gets done. And so make sure that it's really clear and everybody can afford to forget everything that happened in that meeting and will still know what to do 6 days later.
I love the visual there. I feel like we've all taken notes. I do it during meetings like this all the time where I'm like quickly trying to scratch down a note and then the meeting ends and I look at my notes and I go, oh my gosh, what the heck does that mean? But I'll convince myself in the moment that that's enough to remember. So I think that's an excellent visual for people to they got the zap.
Yeah, that's right. So once you've got your to-dos done, the next thing is you want to make sure that you go, all right, we made some decisions. We had some discussions. This was a very productive meeting. Who needs to now be informed of the changes that were just made? Who will be impacted by this? And so this is where we do what we call cascading messages or comms or however you want to discuss that. Think of all your stakeholders. Think of all the people that are affected, perceived or otherwise, by everything that just happened in this meeting. And then ask who needs to be communicated to what just took place. Because we all know like a meeting takes place over here on this side of the company, and then the rest of the company keeps functioning as if that meeting never happened. And then now we have two different ways of doing things. That's what we're trying to prevent. And so we want to stop and ask this question so that everybody's on the same page. And then the last thing is that we want to score the meeting, right? We want to ask everybody. For us, it's 1 to 10 scale. How effective was this meeting? And this is that continual feedback to make sure that we're staying sharp on how we're running our meetings and that we're doing so effectively. And whenever somebody gives an answer that's less than 8, let's stop and get one sentence why, so that we get that feedback and we know what we could do better. But the reason we call them level 10s is our goal is to have this number be a 10 every single week. And what I've found is that if you can essentially do 3 things, you will get a 10 every single time. And if you're low, look in one of these 3 places. The first thing is that were you selecting the right issues? You spend a lot of time on issues that don't matter, you're going to get a low score from somebody. Did everybody get a chance to share openly and honestly about what they think the real issue is and how to solve it? And then did we implement a solution that will actually help? If you select meaty issues, discuss them openly, and implement real solutions, you're going to get a high score. Even if all you solve is one issue, that issue is going to change things that are affecting people's daily lives. And so those are the 3 things that I try to go to. If I get a low score, I'm listening for somebody to explain one of those 3 things as being the answer, even if they don't know that's what's in my head. And I might press a little bit further and say, well, was there a different issue you think we should have discussed? Or what do you think didn't get said? Or why are you concerned about this particular solution? And then I might take that offline and discuss with them a little further.
Do you have a system of teaching proper meeting skills to your staff?
Honestly, I wrote a training to everybody on how to run an L10. I created a cheat sheet for them. So we use a lot of Microsoft products. So I opened a SharePoint that had all the rules to it right there, right? Good lean practices, put the instructions where the activity happens. And then we just did it. It just took practice. I mean, when you think about the miracle of communication, the idea of trying to get everybody on the same page and discussing the same things and understanding one another takes work. But practice is the best way to do that. We start to learn one another. But yeah, just reemphasizing that, getting those clear expectations, providing those helps during the meeting, and then just practice and repetition.
All right. So the chat's blowing up with wanting more info on the L10 as a template and a recap of what we've shared. So I feel like this is the perfect segue here.
Yeah, this is good. Nice one. Nice use of segue. I like that. Appreciate that. One quick thought I want to share. looking through this entire structure, it struck me how aligned it is with the way that we as human beings learn things. And that's where my space is how we learn things. And when we're starting from the perspective of, hey, this is what we need to accomplish, and everyone is on the same page in terms of purpose, and then we know exactly what our outcomes are going to be, and we have the trust because we have built that trust together, then we're able to move forward and accomplish those things. Every single meeting that we attend, whether we realize it or not, is a learning environment. It's a learning event. And we're coming there to learn from each other, to solve things together. So the way this is structured hits every single point of the way we as human beings learn. So it's absolutely genius. Maybe that was intentional, but maybe it just naturally happened because the structure is so good. It nails the way human beings learn. And that's probably why it's so darn effective that way. So fantastic model here that you've shared with us today.
Yeah, and I can't take credit for it. It's a just standard EOS tool called the Level 10 meeting. But I think one of the things I appreciate about the EOS model and the tools in general is that, after you've read the EOS books and you start wanting to go for something a little bit deeper, you start realizing that everybody's saying the same thing. And so just to find a really simple form that you can take and deliver to anyone on your staff, regardless of their background, and they get it, but not only they get it, they can use it and they understand why it works, develops them as a leader, as a manager. And it's just huge. I really, really enjoy it. Even as I started looking around at some other like meeting templates and structures, they're all the same thing. They're absolutely all the same thing. They all have these 3 features: making sure that you're checking in and providing accountability on what matters, that you're effectively discussing the issues that need to be solved, and that you're making that meeting make it to the real world with some very good closing procedures. Those 3 things, every good meeting has them.
Love it. And there's the recap. That's exactly what we've just done here today. Diagnosing that ineffective meeting, structuring a healthy meeting, and becoming a 5-star facilitator. You've got all of those here today. We'd love the thumbs up if you feel like you got that today. Pop that into the chat for us. You've been asking about templates. Yeah, we do have templates. We actually have an L10 process template that we're going to be sharing with you today. It looks kind of like this right here. And we'll be sharing that link with you. That way you can use it, you can view it, you can, if you use Trainual, you can add it to your account so you could use it right inside your account. If you're not a Trainual user right now, you can view it and you'll be able to use the template as it stands. Then check out Trainual if that looks interesting. You want to put it in there. But thank you for sharing this with us, and looking forward to getting this. And we've got a slew of other templates that are on their way as well that are part of this. Mallory, you want to touch on that one?
Yes. So if you are excited for this L10 template, Derek is in the process of reviewing a couple that myself and my partner Samo put together to create this little EOS bundle. So you heard Derek mention scorecards and rocks and some of these other really cool EOS tools that are just really powerful in the workplace. So we've got 6 other ones coming to you shortly. So we'll drop this one first so you can get it immediately, implement it, take that information while it's fresh in your mind, but look forward to those other 6 that are coming as well. We're super excited to share them.
Let's wrap up with this awesome quote that Derek shared with us. And Derek, you want to read it and just kind of share your thoughts on it, and then we'll wrap it up for the day here.
Actually, meetings are not a waste of time. It's what you do in meetings that's a waste of time. If all you do is talk endlessly without solving issues, then yes, you are wasting your time. It's not going anywhere. I think I heard Lencioni say once, the reality is that for most of us who are decision makers, we're going to spend the majority of our time in meetings. And that can actually be a very effective thing if you know what that meeting is aiming at. And so if you can find ways to target the meeting towards impacting people in the business and in the real world, you're going to be a much more effective and productive change maker. And so I think all of us long for impacts in our company. And so here's a great way to do that.
I think I saw Emily put in the chat earlier that her executive team is in meetings about 90% of their day. And I thought that was kind of wild, but if all of those meetings, if that 90% was as productive as this, I could see that being pretty dang powerful. So,
yeah. Oh, yeah.
Well, thank you so much for your time today. I personally rate this a 10. I think that you stuck to all the major points. Laura says 10 out of 10. Yes. Drop how you would rate or score this. We won't call it a meeting. We'll call it what did you call it at the beginning, Shawn?
Oh man, this is our show. This is the Inside the Process show, right? This episode. Rate our episode.
Rate our episode. 1 out of 10. You can totally be honest. Drop all of your feedback in the chat. We'd love to hear it. But again, Derek, thank you so much. This was, I learned so much. This was really effective for me in setting up meetings and facilitating those meetings. So we thank you so much for your time. And until next time, which is the last Wednesday of October, we will see you then.